It was supposed to be just another lunch for the city's most powerful billionaire, until his deaf mother met a shy waitress who spoke a language no one else dared to. What happened next silenced an entire room. Welcome back to the channel. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartwarming stories. Also comment where you are currently. It was a quiet afternoon at the Regal Crest Hotel, the kind of place where crystal chandeliers shimmered like frozen constellations and polished marble floors whispered wealth. Every step echoed refinement, every voice carried a price tag. It was the sort of place where laughter was discreet, elegance was expected, and people like Olivia Hale were invisible, unless they made a mistake. Olivia clutched her serving tray, her fingers trembling slightly as she adjusted her bow tie. She'd been working here for just 3 weeks, and every shift felt like an audition for survival. One wrong step, one wrong tone, and she'd be gone. Around her, the dining room glowed in gold light. Satin napkins folded with military precision, cutlery aligned like soldiers ready for inspection. No one ever looked twice at the waitstaff here, but Olivia had grown used to that. She came from a world where invisibility was safety. Raised in a small rented apartment with peeling wallpaper and humming radiators, she had learned early that quiet was not weakness. It was survival. Silence had been her shield and her home. It was also her sister's world. Ella, her little sister, had been born deaf, a bright, laughing soul who spoke with her hands and her eyes. When other children whispered secrets, Ella's secrets were written in motion, in the graceful dance of fingers. Olivia had learned to sign for her, and soon, words without sound became their language of love. When Ella passed away 2 years earlier, after a long illness, that silence became sacred. Even now, Olivia sometimes caught herself signing to the air, as if her sister might still be listening somewhere beyond the noise of the world. The sharp voice of her manager snapped her back to the present. Table 7, Clark Anderson. Be perfect. Her heart jolted. Everyone at the Regal Crest knew that name. Clark Anderson, the tech billionaire, a man built on brilliance and precision, whose face had graced business magazines more than once. Rumor had it, he never smiled. His mother, Billie Anderson, was equally known in elite circles, graceful, impeccably dressed. A woman of quiet dignity who had faced hearing loss over the years, but carried herself with pride. Olivia took a deep breath as she approached table 7, where mother and son sat beneath a chandelier that poured light like melted diamonds. Clark, sharp-featured and controlled, scanned the menu with the kind of focus that frightened most people. Beside him, Billie smiled softly, her silver hair gleaming against her emerald blouse, her eyes gentle but distant, watching, not listening. Olivia stepped closer, her voice steady but soft. "Good afternoon, ma'am. Would you prefer still or sparkling water?" Billie blinked and smiled politely, but she didn't answer. Clark glanced up, his tone clipped. "She didn't hear you. Just bring still water." Olivia nodded quickly, retreating a step, but something inside her tightened. She had seen that look before, the subtle flicker of isolation behind Billie's smile, the same expression Ella used to wear when surrounded by people who spoke a language she couldn't hear. Her breath caught. Without thinking, Olivia turned back, set the tray down gently, and raised her hands. Her fingers moved in smooth, careful gestures. "Would you like still or sparkling water?" Billie froze. Her eyes widened, shimmering with surprise. Then, as if the years had melted away, she lifted her hands and signed back, slowly but clearly. "You know sign language?" Olivia smiled, a small, nervous nod. "A little," she signed back. For a heartbeat, the entire dining hall seemed to hold its breath. Then Billie laughed, a soundless laugh that somehow filled the air. Her eyes sparkled, her posture softened, and something unspoken passed between them. Across the table, Clark stared, speechless. For years, he'd watched his mother drift through conversations she couldn't follow, dinners that left her politely smiling and quietly excluded. But now she was alive, her hands dancing in joy. In a single gesture, silence had become connection. And that was the moment everything began to change. For a moment, the world inside the Regal Crest Hotel seemed to pause, a still frame of wonder beneath the glittering chandelier. The faint clinking of cutlery faded as eyes turned toward Table 7, where the billionaire's deaf mother and the shy waitress were speaking in a language few recognized, yet everyone felt. Olivia's hands moved gently, almost trembling, as she signed each word with care. "Would you like to start with soup or salad?" Billy's lips parted in a smile that reached her eyes. She signed back eagerly, her gestures flowing with surprising confidence. "Salad, and thank you, dear." Her eyes glistened as if she hadn't been spoken to, truly spoken to, in far too long. Olivia nodded, her heart swelling with something she couldn't quite name. The movement of her fingers felt like a song she hadn't played in years, one she used to perform only for her sister Ella. Every sign carried memory. Ella at 6, giggling when Olivia taught her the alphabet. Ella at 9, stubbornly spelling freedom when their mother told her she couldn't go outside alone. Ella at 17, hands weak from illness, but still signing thank you. And then, that final night. Olivia holding her sister's hand in the hospital room, signing "I love you," through tears that blurred everything. She blinked hard, pulling herself back to the present. Across from her, Billy Anderson was glowing. Cheeks flushed, eyes bright, laughter silent but alive. Her hands fluttered with humor and warmth as she teased Olivia for calling her "ma'am." Olivia chuckled softly. "Then I'll call you Billy," she signed, hesitantly. Billy smiled wider, nodding. "Good girl." The two women fell into an easy rhythm, a graceful duet of hands and expressions that transcended noise. Around them, guests began whispering, curious and enchanted. "Is she deaf?" someone murmured. "Who's that waitress?" whispered another. "Look, she's signing with her." But Olivia didn't hear the murmurs. Her world had narrowed to one shared circle of light, the warmth in Billy's gaze and the soft rhythm of silent communication. Across the table, Clark Anderson leaned back in his chair, watching in quiet disbelief. For years, he'd tried to make his mother comfortable, buying her the best hearing aids, ensuring the staff spoke clearly, even arranging private rooms so she wouldn't feel out of place. But none of it brought this laughter, this light that sparkled in her eyes like it hadn't since before his father died. He watched her hands move with freedom and saw her face lift in joy, and for the first time, something inside him ached. He realized how lonely she must have been, living in a world half muted by silence and half ignored by sound. When Olivia returned with their meal, Billy reached out and lightly touched her hand. "You have a kind soul," she signed. "Not many people take time to learn our world." Olivia's throat tightened. She smiled, blinking back emotion. "I learned for someone I loved." Billy nodded knowingly, her expression soft and maternal. Clark, still silent, couldn't look away. The sight stirred memories of his own childhood. Billy teaching him to read lips when he was small, her laughter echoing through their old home before her hearing began to fade. That laughter had been gone for years, until now. The servers moved like shadows around them, carrying trays and whispers. But at table 7, time seemed to exist differently. Silence spoke louder than any orchestra ever could. Billy signed something that made Olivia laugh out loud for the first time that day. A sound so pure that even Clark smiled unconsciously. And when his mother reached across the table to squeeze Olivia's hand, her eyes glistening with gratitude, Clark felt an unfamiliar sting behind his own eyes. He looked away quickly, clearing his throat, forcing his composure back. But the question pressed against his mind, insistent and deep. A question that wasn't born of irritation or class, but something else entirely. He turned to the hotel manager, who lingered at a distance, pretending not to stare. Clark's voice was low, steady, but filled with a quiet awe. "Who is she?" The manager hesitated. "The waitress, sir? Her name's Olivia Hale." Clark repeated the name under his breath, his gaze still fixed on the girl who had somehow brought his mother's laughter back from silence. Olivia Hale. And for the first time in years, Clark Anderson didn't think about business or control. Only about the miracle happening right before his eyes, beneath the chandelier's golden glow. The last of the lunch plates had been cleared, and the murmur of conversation slowly returned to the golden hush of the Regal Crest Hotel. Yet at table 7, something lingered, a stillness warm and fragile, like a secret only two hearts could hear. Billie Anderson sat back in her chair, still smiling, her hands resting lightly on the edge of the tablecloth. Clark's phone buzzed. He frowned, excused himself quietly, and stepped toward the hallway to take the call. The moment he was gone, the air between Billie and Olivia softened. Unguarded, intimate, safe. Olivia exhaled slowly, her shoulders relaxing for the first time that day. She began to gather glasses, but Billie touched her wrist gently, stopping her. When Olivia looked up, Billie was already signing. "You remind me of someone," Billie said through graceful, deliberate motions. Olivia hesitated, her throat tightening. Her eyes darted toward Clark's empty chair, then back to Billie's kind gaze. She signed back carefully, her fingers trembling. "My sister was deaf too." Billie's expression stilled, eyes wide, brows lifting slightly. Olivia's next gestures were slower, heavier, as if each word carried the weight of memory. "Her name was Ella. She passed away 2 years ago." For a moment, the restaurant around them faded. The world became only the space between their hands. Two women separated by decades, but joined by grief that spoke no language but silence. Billie's lips parted, trembling. Then she signed softly. "I'm sorry. She must have been wonderful." Olivia smiled through the tears threatening to spill. "She was. She used to say silence wasn't empty. It was full of feelings most people never hear." A tear rolled down Billie's cheek, catching the chandelier's light like a falling diamond. She reached across the table, placing her weathered hand over Olivia's younger one. Their hands stayed there, unmoving, a bridge between loss and love, between generations that had both carried someone who lived in the quiet. Neither noticed the curious glances from other tables. In that moment, they weren't waitress and guest. They were two souls meeting in the same ache, finding comfort in recognition. Olivia's mind drifted to those long nights in the hospital, the machines beeping, the sterile smell of antiseptic, Ella's small hand signing, "Don't cry," even when her breath came shallow. Olivia had promised she'd keep signing, that she'd never forget how to speak in silence. And now, here she was, keeping that promise, not to a child she'd lost, but to a stranger who suddenly didn't feel like one. Billie squeezed her hand again, her smile gentle through tears. "Thank you," she signed. "You brought back a piece of my son's childhood. And mine." Olivia shook her head. "No, Mrs. Anderson. You brought back a piece of me." It was then that Clark returned. His phone call ended, his sharp presence reclaiming the table's still air. For a fleeting second, he froze. The sight before him, his mother's hand entwined with the waitress's, stirred a dozen emotions he couldn't quite name. Concern? Maybe. Confusion? Certainly. But beneath it, something else. Something tender and uncertain. He cleared his throat lightly, breaking the moment. "Mother, we should get going," he said, his tone polite but cool. Then, to Olivia, he added, "Thank you for your service." Everything was satisfactory. It was curt, measured. Not cruel, but distant. The walls he'd spent years building around himself rose again before he could stop them. Olivia nodded, her smile small but sincere. "I'm glad you both enjoyed the meal." Clark placed his jacket over his arm and helped Billy to her feet. She looked at Olivia one last time, her lips curling into a knowing smile. Then, when Clark turned away, Billy lifted her hand discreetly and signed across the air, a single motion, graceful and full of gratitude. "Thank you." No one else saw it. The gesture disappeared beneath the shimmer of chandeliers and the quiet chatter of the wealthy. But for Olivia, it burned bright. A silent blessing she would carry long after their footsteps faded from the marble floor. As the door closed behind them, Olivia stood for a moment in the quiet, her heart heavy yet strangely full. Somewhere deep inside, it felt as though Ella had smiled too, whispering through the silence that love, once given, never truly leaves. The sound of the dining hall faded behind Olivia as she stepped through the service door and into the narrow staff corridor. The warm glow of chandeliers gave way to harsh fluorescent light that hummed overhead. The contrast was sharp, as if she had stepped out of a dream and back into the cold pulse of reality. She had just finished clearing the Andersons' table when she felt a presence waiting near the corner. Mr. Halpern, the hotel manager, stood stiffly by the employee lockers, his expression unreadable, but his tone already sharp. "Miss Hale, in my office. Now." Olivia's stomach dropped. Her first thought was that she had forgotten an order or spilled something. But when she entered the small glass-walled office, the expression on Halpern's face told her it was something worse. He closed the door, arms folded. "I've received feedback from one of our VIP clients, Mr. Anderson." Her chest tightened. "Mr. Anderson?" "Yes." His tone was clipped, mechanical. Apparently he felt uncomfortable with how familiar you were toward his mother. Olivia blinked. "Uncomfortable?" She shook her head quickly. "Sir, I was just trying to—" Halpern raised a hand to silence her. "You're not here to try, Miss Hale. You're here to serve, polite, invisible, efficient. What you did, whatever it was, crossed a line." Her throat went dry. "She couldn't hear me," she said softly, voice trembling. "I only wanted to help her feel—" "Stop." The word cut like glass. "Intentions don't matter here. Optics do. You understand me?" The tears she'd been holding back pricked at her eyes, but she forced herself to nod. "Yes, sir." Halpern exhaled through his nose, pinching the bridge of it as if this conversation exhausted him. "You're new. I'll overlook it this once. But if anything like this happens again, anything at all, you're done here." He didn't wait for her reply. The dismissal was silent but absolute. Olivia turned and walked out of the office, her chest burning with humiliation. The hallway around her seemed smaller, the light harsher. She kept her head down as she passed other waiters, pretending to be busy polishing cutlery or setting tables. None of them spoke. None of them needed to. Everyone knew what it meant to be called into Halpern's office. By the time her shift ended, the weight of the day pressed so heavily on her shoulders that even the simple act of untying her apron felt unbearable. She folded it neatly, her trembling hands betraying the storm inside. Outside, the city was quiet beneath a fine drizzle. Neon lights rippled across puddles on the sidewalk. Olivia walked slowly, her shoes clicking against wet stone, her reflection fractured by the rain. The air smelled of rain and exhaust, but somehow she found it comforting, real, grounding. Every few steps she replayed the scene in her head. Billy's smile, the sparkle in her eyes, the warmth in her hand. She could still see it, that fragile joy of being understood after so long. It had been genuine, unspoken, and priceless. And yet, to everyone else, it had been an offense, a mistake. She tilted her face toward the misty sky, eyes glistening as raindrops mingled with tears. Somewhere up there she hoped her sister was watching, maybe even proud. Her voice came out as a whisper, barely louder than the rain. At least she felt seen. The words hung in the air like a quiet prayer, defiant, tender, and full of ache. Then, wrapping her thin jacket tighter around herself, Olivia continued down the slick, lamplit street. Each step echoed softly, the sound of someone who had lost something precious but refused to let go of what was right. Because sometimes, even when kindness costs you everything, it's still worth the price. If you believe that kindness should never be silenced, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. More true-to-life stories are coming, because compassion always deserves a voice. The next morning dawned gray and gentle, the kind of morning that felt half asleep. A thin mist wrapped the streets outside the Regal Crest Hotel, and Olivia arrived early, hoping the quiet would steady her nerves. She still carried the sting of Mr. Halpern's scolding from the day before, his cold voice replaying in her mind like an unwelcome echo. She tried to focus on folding napkins, on counting glasses, on anything that made her invisible again. But her thoughts kept drifting back to Billy Anderson. Her radiant smile, her warm eyes, the way her hands had moved with such joy. For a moment, Olivia wondered if she would ever see her again. "Miss Hale?" The voice startled her. She turned, and her heart nearly stopped. Clark Anderson stood at the service counter, tall, polished, out of place amid the clatter of trays and silver. Even here, surrounded by ordinary things, he carried that quiet authority that made the air shift when he entered a room. "Mr. Anderson?" Olivia stammered, instinctively straightening her uniform. "Good morning, sir." He gave a small nod, his expression unreadable, but not unkind. "Good morning. I hope I'm not interrupting." "No, sir, not at all." There was a pause, a silence that stretched a little too long before he said almost awkwardly, "My mother can't stop talking about you." Olivia blinked. "About me?" He nodded. "She said you spoke to her in a way no one has in years." His tone softened slightly, something warmer threading through it. "She wants to see you again. For tea. At my penthouse this afternoon." Olivia's breath caught. "Oh, She hesitated, her fingers twisting the corner of a napkin. "Sir, I'm not sure that's appropriate. The manager—" "I'll speak to Mr. Halpern," Clark interrupted firmly, his voice low but certain. "You won't be penalized for attending. Consider it a personal invitation." She searched his face, uncertain. Beneath the crisp confidence, there was a flicker of sincerity, even humility. He wasn't used to asking. He was used to commanding. And yet, here he was, asking her to spend time with his mother, as though something about her presence had unsettled the order of his world. After a long beat, she nodded. "If it would make her happy, I'll come." A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. It would make her very happy. By late afternoon, Olivia found herself standing before the tall glass tower of Anderson Residences, her reflection small against its mirrored surface. The doorman greeted her kindly, and within minutes, she was escorted into a penthouse that felt like stepping into the clouds. Walls of white marble, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the silver sprawl of the city. And there, waiting by the grand piano, was Billy Anderson, radiant in a soft lavender dress. Her face lit up when she saw Olivia. She signed joyfully, "You came!" Olivia laughed, signing back, "I couldn't say no." Clark watched from the background, leaning against a pillar, a faint smile breaking through his usual composure. He didn't interrupt. He simply watched as his mother and the young waitress fell into conversation, their hands moving gracefully, their faces alive with laughter. They talked about everything: music, childhood, favorite recipes. Billy confessed her secret love for baking chocolate soufflés. Olivia admitted she used to bake for her sister Ella, who couldn't hear the oven timer but always knew by the smell when they were ready. Billy laughed silently, eyes crinkling in delight. And for the first time, Clark realized that this warmth, was something no amount of money could buy. He'd built towers, empires, legacies, but what filled the room now was something he hadn't felt in years: human connection. At one point, Billy turned and signed to her son. "She reminds me of you when you were little. Kind, before the world made you serious." Clark chuckled softly, looking at Olivia. "I'll take that as a compliment." Olivia smiled, unsure how to respond, her heart fluttering with a strange mix of gratitude and disbelief. She didn't belong in this world of luxury. Yet somehow, at that table, in that laughter, she did. As the city lights flickered on below, Clark glanced at his mother and then at Olivia, realizing that in all his years of chasing success, he had forgotten how it felt to truly see someone, and to be seen. For the first time in a long while, the penthouse didn't feel like a fortress. It felt like home. The evening air hung quiet over the city, a soft shimmer of light stretching across the skyline. The world outside the glass walls of Anderson Penthouse glowed with 1,000 flickering windows. But inside, the hum of warmth still lingered from the laughter that had filled the room hours earlier. Billy had long since retired to her bedroom, smiling as she signed "thank you" to Olivia before she went. Now, only two people remained: Clark Anderson and Olivia Hale, standing by the open balcony where the night breeze slipped through like a whisper. For a while, neither spoke. Clark stood with his hands resting on the railing, his reflection merging with the city lights. Olivia stayed near the doorway, unsure if she should leave or stay. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It felt fragile, like a space holding something important, waiting to be said. "Tea?" Clark finally asked, breaking the quiet. She smiled faintly. "I think I've had enough to float home." He chuckled softly, a sound so human it surprised her. He turned toward her then, his expression gentler than it had ever been. "My mother hasn't laughed like that in years," he said. "You should know that." Olivia looked down, a shy flush touching her cheeks. She just needed someone to listen in her language. He studied her for a moment before speaking again, quieter now. "When my father died," he began, "I buried myself in work. I thought if I made enough money, if I built something big enough, she'd never have to hurt again. I thought success could protect her." He paused, the weight of the words thick in the air. "But somewhere along the way, I stopped listening." Olivia's gaze softened. "You were trying to keep her safe." He shook his head slowly. "No, I was trying to keep myself safe, from feeling powerless again." For a moment, the mask of the billionaire, the calculated calm, the distance, slipped. In its place was a son, haunted by guilt, trying to understand how love had turned into absence. "You know," Olivia said softly, stepping closer, "you don't need to speak to be heard, Mr. Anderson." He turned to her, meeting her eyes. "You just need to listen differently." The simplicity of her words hit him like a truth he'd forgotten how to hold. For years, he'd measured his worth by deals closed and walls built, but this quiet connection, made everything else feel hollow. He looked out toward the city again. "She used to hum when I was a boy," he said quietly. "Even after she started losing her hearing, she'd hum. I didn't realize it was her way of staying close to sound. When it stopped, I thought she'd just accepted it." His voice trembled slightly. "I never asked if she missed it." Olivia's throat tightened. She reached for the balcony rail, the cool metal grounding her. "You still can," she whispered. "It's never too late to listen again." He nodded slowly, eyes glistening under the city's glow. "Maybe not." There was another pause, softer now, a silence that carried understanding. Clark glanced at her, his tone careful. You mentioned earlier that you learned sign language for your sister. Olivia nodded, her voice barely above a breath. Ella, she was born deaf. My mother worked double shifts, so I became her translator. Her voice, her ears, her world. But when she got sick, she hesitated, her gaze dropping to the city below. I couldn't fix it. All I could do was sign to her when she was too weak to open her eyes. Clark's expression shifted, empathy replacing the steel. I'm sorry, he said softly. Olivia smiled faintly through the ache. It's okay. I still sign sometimes when I'm alone. It makes me feel like she's still with me. I guess. It became my prayer. The city breeze carried her words away like a sigh. Clark watched her in silence, not the kind of silence that came from distance, but from reverence. For the first time in years, he didn't want to fix anything or explain himself. He just wanted to listen. Thank you, he said finally, for reminding me what it sounds like to be human. Olivia smiled, her eyes bright against the night. You're welcome, Mr. Anderson. But when their eyes met again, something unspoken passed between them. Not love, not yet, but recognition. Two hearts that had both carried loss were, for the first time, no longer alone in it. And beneath the hum of the city, the silence between them didn't feel empty anymore. A week later, the Regal Crest Hotel shimmered brighter than ever. Every chandelier blazed with gold light. Every polished surface mirrored perfection. The hotel's grand ballroom had been transformed into a sea of tuxedos and silk gowns for the highly anticipated Anderson Foundation Charity Gala, a night to raise funds for children with hearing impairments. Olivia stood at the far end of the room, her heart pounding beneath her uniform. She hadn't seen Clark or Billy since that evening on the balcony. She had been reassigned to backroom duties, folding napkins, carrying trays to the waiters who served the VIP section. Mr. Halpern, the manager, had made it clear that she was to stay away from Clark Anderson's table. Don't even look in that direction, he'd said sternly that morning. You're lucky to still have this job. Olivia nodded, even though her chest ached. She didn't want to cause trouble. Not tonight, not at Clark's event. Still, as she peeked through the gilded curtains, her breath caught. There she was, Billy Anderson. Dressed in silver and pearls, Billy looked radiant, her presence commanding and gentle all at once. Clark sat beside her, smiling politely for the cameras, but Olivia noticed the way his eyes softened each time his mother laughed. The sight filled her with quiet pride. This gala wasn't just about charity. It was proof that Clark had begun to listen differently. Backstage, chaos brewed. One of the waitresses assigned to the VIP tables had fallen ill. Another had spilled red wine across her uniform. The catering supervisor barked orders into the air. We're one server short for table 1, Clark Anderson's table. The staff froze. No one volunteered. No one wanted the risk. Olivia's pulse quickened. Against every warning echoing in her mind, she stepped forward. I'll go, she said softly. The supervisor looked at her, desperate. Fine. Just be quick. And careful. Olivia smoothed her apron, took a deep breath, and stepped into the glittering storm of the ballroom. The music softened as she approached table 1. Billy saw her first. Her eyes widened, and then a smile, radiant and unmistakable, spread across her face. She raised her hands immediately. Olivia, she signed with excitement. Olivia's lips curved into a small, shy smile. Mrs. Anderson, you look beautiful tonight. Cameras began to flash. Guests turned their heads. The billionaire's mother was signing joyfully with a waitress, and laughing. Clark turned, startled, and when he saw who it was, something inside him shifted. Around them, whispers rippled through the crowd. Is that the same girl? She's signing with her. Look how happy Mrs. Anderson is. Olivia tried to focus on serving, but Billy kept signing, eager to share stories. about the cause, about Clark's childhood, about how proud she was tonight. And Olivia, her eyes warm with emotion, responded with gentle signs and nods. The moment was beautiful, human, until a sharp voice sliced through the air. "Miss Hale!" Mr. Halpern stormed across the ballroom floor, his face flushed with anger. "What do you think you're doing? You were explicitly told not to serve this table." The crowd fell silent. Olivia froze, the tray trembling slightly in her hands. Billy looked up, frowning, trying to read his lips. There was no one else?" Olivia began, her voice quiet. Halpern cut her off. "Excuses won't save you this time. You're done here." And then came another voice, calm, deep, and steady. "That's enough, Mr. Halpern." Every head turned. Clark Anderson had risen from his seat, his expression firm but composed. "She's not done here," he said. "She just saved your event from falling apart." Halpern stammered. "Sir, I was only—" "Protecting your pride, not the people who actually make this place work," Clark interrupted, his voice low but cutting. "You should thank her, not humiliate her." Billy's eyes shone with pride as she reached for Olivia's hand and signed, "Thank you, dear." The ballroom, which moments earlier had been a swirl of gossip and noise, erupted in applause. Cameras flashed again. But this time, the story they captured wasn't of scandal or status. It was of courage, compassion, and dignity, standing tall in a room built on appearances. Olivia's throat tightened, her eyes glistening. Clark looked at her then, really looked, and gave a small, reassuring nod. For the first time, someone powerful had seen her not as invisible, but as essential. As the applause faded, Clark leaned toward his mother, signing clumsily but proudly, "You were right. She's special." Billy laughed silently, squeezing his arm. Olivia smiled through tears, her heart swelling with something she hadn't felt in a long time: belonging. That night, beneath chandeliers that once symbolized distance, silence had spoken louder than status. Real power isn't in money or titles, it's in standing up for what's right. The applause from the earlier scene still echoed faintly in Olivia's mind as the night carried on. The ballroom shimmered beneath the chandeliers, the air thick with pride and anticipation. Waiters hurried between tables. A pianist filled the pauses with gentle notes, and photographers waited for one moment: the billionaire's speech. At the center of it all stood Clark Anderson, poised behind a glass podium. His mother, Billy, sat proudly in the front row, her hands folded over her lap, her smile tender but expectant. Olivia stood near the back, still catching her breath from the chaos that had nearly cost her everything. She hadn't expected to stay, but Billy had insisted she remain. For luck, she'd signed with a wink. Clark cleared his throat, the murmurs fading. The large screen behind him shimmered with the logo of the Anderson Foundation Gala. The night's purpose: to raise money for children who couldn't hear the world, yet had so much to say. He glanced down at the pages of his prepared speech. Each word was immaculate, scripted by a publicist, polished for investors. He could have delivered it perfectly. But as he looked out over the glittering sea of faces, people of wealth and influence, all watching, his gaze landed on Billy. She smiled up at him, proud but unaware of the words she couldn't hear. And then, just beyond her, he saw Olivia. Standing near the wall, her eyes gentle, her hands clasped tightly. In that instant, something in him shifted. He folded the pages slowly and set them aside. When he looked back up, his voice trembled slightly, but there was strength beneath it. "I had a speech prepared tonight," he began, "but I think it's time I spoke differently." A ripple of curiosity moved through the crowd. Clark inhaled deeply, his pulse drumming in his ears. He turned toward his mother, then raised his hands. They trembled, awkward at first, but then began to move with deliberate care. "Thank you," he signed, "for giving my mother her voice back." Gasps rippled through the room. Some guests covered their mouths. Others leaned forward to watch. Billy froze. Then her face crumpled as tears spilled freely down her cheeks. Clark's voice broke slightly as he continued aloud, still signing with his hands. "When I built this company, I thought I was giving her the world. I didn't realize. I'd taken away the one thing she needed most, to be understood." The silence in the ballroom was total now. Even the clink of glasses stopped. Cameras flashed like stars, capturing the trembling hands of a man who had never shown his heart to anyone until this moment. He smiled through the emotion that cracked his composure. "One person reminded me that listening isn't always about sound. It's about presence. It's about love." He turned then, his eyes searching until they found Olivia in the crowd. "Miss Olivia Hale," he said softly, his voice echoing through the hall. "Would you join us, please?" Olivia froze, her breath caught in her chest. Every face turned toward her as the lights followed Clark's gaze. Billy nodded through tears, motioning encouragingly. With trembling steps, Olivia crossed the ballroom floor. When she reached the stage, Clark extended his hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, emotion thick in his throat, "this young woman reminded me that silence is not emptiness. It's another kind of music." The crowd rose to their feet. Applause swelled, first polite, then thunderous, echoing off marble and glass. Billy stood too, clapping joyfully before covering her face, overcome with tears. Clark looked at his mother, then at the audience. "Starting tonight," he continued, voice firm and clear, "we are launching the Anderson Foundation for Silent Hearts, a program dedicated to teaching sign language, supporting hearing-impaired children, and ensuring that no voice, spoken or silent, is ever ignored again." The room erupted once more. Guests stood, cheering. Photographers captured the trio, Billionaire, Mother, and Waitress, bound by something greater than class or fame. Billy stepped onto the stage, tears glistening, and wrapped her arms around Olivia. The older woman signed with trembling hands, "You gave me back my son." Olivia shook her head, her own eyes wet. "You gave me back my faith," she signed in return. As flashbulbs burst and applause thundered, Clark looked out over the crowd, his hand still clasping Olivia's. In that moment, the divide between power and humility, silence and speech, dissolved completely. For the first time in years, Clark Anderson didn't feel like a man standing above the world. He felt part of it. And for Billy, the silence she'd once feared now felt sacred, because it carried the sound of love. The city had changed color. Evening light spilled across the skyline in shades of rose and amber, painting the glass towers in soft reflection. From her corner in the Regal Crest Hotel, Olivia Hale stood by the panoramic window, her reflection framed against the endless horizon. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't watching the world from the outside. She was part of it. Weeks had passed since the night of the Anderson Foundation Gala, but the echoes of that moment still rippled through her life. The photos had gone viral. Clark's trembling hands signing to his mother, Billy's tears, Olivia's stunned expression. People called it the silent speech that moved the city. Donations poured in, and the new foundation became a beacon for families living in silence. But beyond the headlines, what lingered most was something quieter, something real. Olivia had been promoted to guest relations coordinator, a position Clark insisted she deserved after changing the way his company listened. Alongside her new role, the Anderson Foundation had sponsored her enrollment in a special education and communication program, so she could one day help others learn to bridge silence with compassion. She smiled faintly as she placed a steaming cup of tea on the table, the scent of jasmine drifting through the air. Across from her sat Billy Anderson, radiant as ever, signing cheerfully about the charity's new community class for children. Her hands moved gracefully, her laughter silent but vivid, echoing in light and motion. They're learning so quickly, Billy signed, eyes twinkling. One boy told me he can finally talk to his sister again. Olivia's heart warmed. That's beautiful, she signed back. You've given them hope. Billy shook her head, smiling softly. No, my dear. You gave it to me first. They both laughed, and for a moment, the soundless rhythm between them felt like music. The door opened then, and Clark stepped in, no longer in the sharp suits and rigid composure that once defined him. Today, he wore a simple white shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbow, his expression light. He carried a box of pastries and an ease that seemed new, as if the man who once lived by structure had finally learned to live by feeling. Am I late? He asked with a grin. Billy signed with mock sternness. You always are. He laughed, placing the pastries on the table before sitting beside them. I bring peace offerings, he said, unboxing delicate eclairs. Olivia chuckled, shaking her head as Billy dramatically rolled her eyes. They ate, they signed, they laughed. 3 lives once divided by silence, now stitched together by understanding. As the sky deepened to violet, Olivia reached for the silver pendant that hung around her neck, a gift from Billy. 2 intertwined hands, delicately carved, gleamed softly in the fading light. On the card that had accompanied it were the words, "Silence isn't loneliness." She touched it gently, her eyes misting. In that stillness, she felt the presence of her sister Ella. As if somewhere beyond the clouds, she too was signing, smiling, proud. Thank you, Olivia whispered under her breath, eyes lifted toward the horizon. For teaching me that silence was never empty. Billy looked up, curious. What did you say? Olivia smiled. Just a thank you. For everything. The chandelier above them glowed golden as laughter. Quiet and heartfelt, filled the room. Clark leaned back in his chair, watching his mother and Olivia sign to each other, and for once, he didn't think about legacy or headlines. He simply watched love move in silence and realized that some connections speak beyond sound, beyond time, beyond words. As the camera of memory pulled back, 3 figures beneath the chandelier, their hands moving gracefully in the still air. A soft narration seemed to rise from the quiet. Sometimes the smallest gesture, a single sign, a single smile, can heal what a lifetime of words could not. And in that quiet, golden evening, the language of silence became their bond forever. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like, share, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another heart-touching story about kindness, compassion, and the power of love that speaks without words.